Okay, welcome everyone. This is our November Meaningful Speech Lunch and Learn, except we are actually having it in the evening this month. We are here today with Laura Hayes, who is a speech language pathologist and AAC specialist. And Laura is also the author of our new course that is coming out in February 2023, which is AAC for Gestalt language processors. So I thought it would be a great idea to have a live Q&A all about AAC and Gestalt processing tonight with Laura, kind of a little overview of the course and get into questions that people have submitted. So I have questions both from Instagram, where people have submitted some questions over the past week, and also via email from those of you that are currently in the main meaningful speech course. This will be published on YouTube as well. So some people may be watching this later that are not in the main meaningful speech course. So I'm just going to quickly say, if you are interested in general information about Gestalt language processing and Gestalt language development, just please go to our website, meaningfulspeech.com. Okay, I'm going to let a few more people in here, and I would like to introduce Laura to you and get you started. So Laura Hayes is a speech language pathologist and AAC specialist from Missouri. She has over 13 years of experience in both the medical and educational settings. In her role as a therapist and an AAC specialist, she's had a special interest in supporting autistic children who have complex communication needs. Having seen many Gestalt language processors, she supported Flourish using AAC. She combined her clinical and professional experience to bring this new AAC plus GLP course to meaningful speech. It is her goal to help others learn how to give Gestalt language processors a voice and to help parents, speech language pathologists, teachers, and other professionals feel more confident as communication partners. Laura resides in Missouri with her husband and 2 young children, and she runs the Instagram account AAC Innovations. And you may have seen today, Laura and I did a post on why not to prompt your AAC user. So if anyone has any questions about that, they can also drop them in the chat. So Laura, let's get started here. I'm going to just start out by asking you, like, what is this course all about and what does it entail?
Such a great question, Alex. And it comes with a simple and complex answer. So simply, you and I both have been getting questions about what do we do for someone who we've recognized is a Gestalt language processor and who uses AAC. And also, would someone who I know who is GLP also benefit from AAC? And so we sought to answer those questions. This course, our hope is that it will do just that and answer some other finer questions that we've been getting a lot of, such as what does it look like when we customize for someone who is a Gestalt language processor in stage 1? What does it look like on different AAC systems? What other areas of assessment should we consider for someone who's non-speaking who uses AAC or who would benefit from AAC? What is AAC? So we're going to go through that in the course. We're going to look at an AAC overview. We are going to look at AAC assessment for GLP. We're going to go over, again, what is GLP versus ALP, analytic language processing? And then what does it look like for therapy for someone who is a Gestalt language processor using AAC?
All right, thank you for that overview, Laura. I want to get into, let's say, some of the controversial things that have already come up about this course. So I'm just going to start with, what research is this based on?
So let's talk about that because it's a really, really important question. And as of this date, November 10th, 2022, there is no formal empirical research on specific AAC and GLP. We have research from Barry Brazant, from Marge Blanc. We have research from several different authors on what Gestalt language processing looks like, echolalia, but we don't have it within AAC. We do have the other forms of evidence-based practice in this course that are embedded. So we're looking at client values. When we kind of look at the triangular data of what is evidence-based practice, there's the idea of internal evidence versus external evidence. So we don't have external evidence. We do have some internal evidence from case studies. If there was a presentation I did with Kate McLaughlin and Kate Flaxman for AAC in the cloud where we looked at some of that. We also have client and parent perspectives integrated. And then we are looking back to that language research, as I mentioned, because we do know that AAC is the tool for self-expression. So we can look to language strategies and language research when we're using therapeutic supports for AAC.
Yeah, so just to clarify for any parents that might be out there that might be watching this, a couple things that we didn't get into. AAC is augmentative and alternative communication. And we're going to talk about some of the different types of that throughout this interview. And then the other thing I just wanted to clarify is we as speech pathologists are part of the American Speech and Hearing Association here in the United States, and ASHA has published information that talks about what evidence-based practice is. There's this nice little triangle that they show, and there are 3 pillars of evidence-based practice, and research is just one of them. The other 2 are client perspectives and clinical experience, and we basically are able to hit 2.5 out of the 3 of those in this course. I just know that research question is going to come up over and over again, but you know what? We decided you all needed this information way too much for us to wait 10 to 15 years until this research comes out. So we will have that disclaimer all over our course, but we want you all to know that this is based on best practices and the information that we do have at hand right now.
And I'll also say too, Alex, that we plan to update the course regularly in the sense that when the research comes, it will be available there, and we will customize and we will change the course as we get that information coming in.
Yeah, absolutely. And you all know that I do that with the main course. So when somebody points something out to me that I've done wrong, I go in there and correct it. I've changed videos before. I have uploaded new handouts. We had that nice new research article come out this year from Cohen and team. So that's up on our site now. So we're trying to stay on top of things and keep you all in the know as things are ever changing. Okay, Laura, so another quick question regarding the course, and then we're going to go into member questions. So what are some, well, okay, I'm going to ask it like this. Are we reinventing the AAC wheel or rewriting what we know about AAC organization and research?
I think there's a few misconceptions, and I think that is the main one when we're talking about augmentative and alternative communication and GLP. It's that we're saying throw out the baby with the bathwater, completely redo everything that we know tried and true about AAC, throw out the other research, throw out the language organization, and just start from scratch. And I don't really see anyone saying that, myself included. Good AAC is, as Kate Flaxman says, I'm going to quote her for a second, good AAC is still good AAC, which is why at the beginning of this course is going to talk all about that. What do we already know? What does research already tell us? What is good AAC? What are all the components that we know? We are not going to be rewriting that. We're not going to be reinventing that. We're not going to look at some other misconceptions I've heard is just that it's a phrase-based system, put everything on a phrase-based system. Replace all the vocabulary on the core page or completely reorganize it to put stage 1 gestalts on that core page. And that's just not true, because we know that that flexible language is going to be needed for someone who progresses through NLA stages and is in stage 4 through stage 6, right? We're going to need all of that vocabulary so that it's flexible and spontaneous and autonomous. It's just a matter of thinking about it. There is actually a good research article that talks about how systematic organization of an AAC system should reflect the processing style of the individual's mindset. And so that actually, if you guys kind of want to dive into the data with me, that's Franco, Silva, Lima, and Fidalgo from 2018. So I think it's really important. We customize and personalize AAC devices and systems for every single AAC user. So when we think about how we're supporting someone who naturally thinks as a cognitive Gestalt processor, or looking at Gestalt language processing, I think that we really need to think about that and customize and personalize it for them as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's, something like you said, SLPs have been doing since the beginning of AAC. We always talk about individualizing, customizing. So why should it be any different for a Gestalt processor? But I think the burning question right now with a lot of people is, how do you do that? Like, how do you customize this device for a Gestalt language processor? And the other question I get all the time is, what's the best device for a Gestalt language processor? So we're going to get into both of those. So let me look at this, and I think maybe let's just start with that. So someone wrote in and said, which AAC apps are the most beneficial? So a lot of people call them apps. What we're really talking about is a robust system. So Laura, just clarify for everyone what that is, and then we'll get into it.
So robust AAC, well, let's take a step back for a second, and let's just talk about augmentative and alternative communication. So alternative means in other words, you're not using your spoken language, so you don't have that as a viable means to communicate. So you're using it as an alternate method of communication. Augmentative means you have some spoken words, but you need it to augment. And that can be because you have dysregulation, or you have a motoric ability that inhibits you from being understood by a familiar or unfamiliar communication partner. Something is inhibiting your ability to flexibly and spontaneously use your mouth to use spoken words. So when we understand that, we're going to use a supportive method. And that can look from everything from no tech, so sign language, gestures, all the way up to high tech, which is, like you mentioned, Alex, those robust AAC apps or dedicated devices. All of that is kind of embedded under the umbrella term of AAC. And what was you asked a different question, and now I forgot what it was.
Well, I just wanted people to understand what robust AAC
yes.
is. Mm-hmm.
So the robust piece of it is that we know that it will grow all the way up to when we are an independent autonomous communicator. And so we want to make sure that they have access to robust vocabulary. That includes core vocabulary, and that is about 80% of the words that you and I use throughout our day. Words like I, you, eat, go, stop. Those are all words that we are going to recycle throughout our day. And then also fringe vocabulary, and that is about the other 20%. For me, it's coffee. I love talking about coffee. I love talking about my kids. It might be my kids' names. These are things that not all of you are going to use, but I might use depending upon the context of what I'm talking about.
That would be your personalized fringe vocabulary.
Exactly. Sometimes we even call it personalized core because it's really meaningful for us and we're going to use it a lot. But in general, the fringe is going to be context specific or activity specific. If you go to McDonald's, you're going to use different vocabulary than if you are maybe sitting at your dinner table.
So why are we not recommending that people start with well, dare I say it, picture exchange, or even just low tech, a printout with maybe a grid with 5 or 6 choices. Why are we not recommending that?
Well, so we have heard from autistic adults that that in itself has been a traumatizing experience. And then there's not a huge level of capacity for like a growth mindset. If you think if the trajectory of AAC, even at its best, if you're looking at picture exchange communication system, you are going to have to shift eventually. There's nothing in there. If you want to be completely autonomous and have access to be completely autonomous, you have to have access to the 26 letters of the alphabet. There is nothing in picture exchange that has access to the alphabet. So I think that that is a critical thing to consider when we think about where we want someone to go on the trajectory and roadmap of AAC in language. So to go back to that robust piece, we want things that have core and fringe vocabulary. We want things that have access to all 26 letters of the alphabet. And we want things that are going to support all the areas of language with syntax, semantics, pragmatics, phonology, and morphology. Like we want all of those things.
Yep. So that being said, I know there are a bunch of people out there that are like, for whatever XYZ reason, this kid has no access to robust AAC and I have to do low tech. So Laura, will you get into how you can do low tech for Gestalt language processors in the course?
Yeah, sure will. We recognize that not everybody has access to robust high-tech devices right away for a variety of reasons. We will talk about funding sources for AAC and avenues to get that. We'll talk about trials that you can do that have low cost or are free. We're going to dive into all that. We're going to dive into light tech AAC as well. And light tech just means that it is printable, making it more affordable, more accessible in the here and the right now.
All right, so now that we have all those definitions out of the way, let's go back to this question that everyone is dying for you to answer. So a parent wrote in and said, what AAC apps are most beneficial for Gestalt language processors? So again, we're talking about apps on an iPad that would be part of a robust system. So what was your answer to this parent, Laura?
So completely understandable question. And I really, really, really wish it had a simple, straightforward answer. It would make my job so much easier, but it just doesn't. Each AAC system has different unique features that lend themselves to different users. So in the course, we're going to review robust systems. We're going to talk about how they have different layouts and what that organization looks like. And then depending upon both your users' access, and that can be their physical access. So are they reaching for it? Are they using scanning? Are they using eye gaze? And then their vision and their hearing, those all come into access. And then their language needs. Those different features will lend themselves to different features in the apps. So what I will say today is that some of the robust apps and softwares out there include Cough Drop, Grid, Lampboards for Life, Proloquo to Go, and the newer Proloquo, Snap, Speak for Yourself, and Touch Chat with Word Power. I will completely emphasize that that is not an all exhaustive list, but those are the ones that I think have a lot of vendor support, which is really, really important too when we're looking at AAC use and the technical support and the training that goes alongside it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we have not revealed this yet, but I'm going to come right out and say it right now. We have a bunch of AAC specialists that are working with us that will be doing bonus modules on how to program all of these different systems for Gestalt processors. I think we have about 6 with some of the main systems. And, we're going to talk about some of the different features that certain systems have that are maybe a little bit better than others. So I'm just going to bring up one example. If you have a stage 1 Gestalt language processor that has a ton of media gestalts, touch chat might be a nice system for that Gestalt processor, because it's one of the only systems that will allow you to embed media clips. And that might be super huge for that particular kid. And so knowing all of these differences in the systems can also sort of help you understand how to move forward with your different client or student. Do you want to add to that, Laura?
Yep. That is a big one. And I also have seen individuals with incredible motor planning, like they are faster than I can even watch. I have seen them do amazing things on Lampboards for Life. I also, you mentioned, looking at features, and that is a big one because Touch Chat with Word Power is the only one to my knowledge where you can embed, you can kind of tweak Cough Drop, but really like the only one where you can embed those video media gestalts, like you're saying, Alex, is going to be Touch Chat with Word Power. If you're looking for features, let's go back to the original idea of like, okay, well, what do I do if I really want to start now, or I really want to go into an AAC assessment and kind of help it along? Create a list of features that you see or that you think your child would benefit from on how they are communicating now. Because even if they are not speaking, they are communicating. We know in the SLP world, we talk about all behavior is communication. So they're showing you, even if they're not speaking with their mouth, they're showing you communication. And so again, the course will talk more in detail about this, but write down features you think your child would benefit from. Is it videos? Is it audio? We've talked about music on a lot of kids that are musical Gestalt learners. Create that list and start exploring either on your own, just by researching the ones that we've talked about today, or really best practices going to be getting that formal AAC assessment from someone who specializes so they can help feature match the software to your child or that AAC user's ability.
Well, Laura, what if the AAC person has no clue about Gestalt process?
Well, we have to teach them, right? So that's when you say, come and take Alex's main meaningful speech course, or come and take if it's after February, come and take this course, right?
So just keep that in mind. If the child does end up getting a specialized AAC evaluation, chances are probably pretty slim that specialist is well-versed in Gestalt processing, but you never know, because I feel like everyone's learning right now. But just keep that in mind, that you may need to tweak some things when you start working with that child.
And I know this question got asked on Instagram, but know too that as the course comes out, there won't be a separate registry, but for individuals that have completed, we'll have a way to show on that registry that you've already got, Alex, that they've completed the AAC course as well.
Yeah, we will definitely be doing that. So somebody just sent me a message saying that Cough Drop only has email support, and that was really difficult for a particular parent. And they needed to switch to LAMP so they could talk to an actual rep. So this is, I think, something that we are going to, as best as we can, help people understand it, when we go through these different systems within the course, because that could be a deal breaker for some families.
Yes, and I think it should be something that we really put at the top of our list. Like, what does that support look like for training, for technical support? One of the reasons why, you might be wondering, why did Cough Drop even make the list then? Well, Cough Drop made the list because Cough Drop is one of the only robust systems out there that can be put on an Android tablet. And not everyone has the affordability to get an iPad. It's a question I still get a lot, is what can I put on an Android tablet? And so our options are significantly limited. It is also one of the softwares that has the most versatility with language programming. So Arabic, oh gosh, there's a few more obscure languages that cough drop is really one of the only ones available. So just kind of keeping that in mind as dual language learners, that may be the best feature match for them if they're a dual language learner.
But how crazy that their only support is through email when people are selecting it because maybe they're not English is not their first language. That seems so bizarre.
Mhm.
But also, I mean, it is not probably as well funded as some of these other larger companies that are able to maybe provide 24-hour support. So
Yeah.
anyway, let's move on. So hopefully that answered that question for you guys. Sorry, Laura.
I just want to add one thing here, because I think it's also equally important when we look at robust AAC apps. I think people watching this might be like, well, I could just get started with a free app that says AAC and I can just program from there. And why we kind of want to avoid that is, yes, it's free, but what we know about a lot of free apps is that they're not robust. So they don't have some of those things we mentioned earlier. And they don't have staying power, which means that they're here today and gone tomorrow. Technology is always changing, and it's very expensive in the app world to keep things going. And so those disappear a lot and often also don't have the ability to be backed up. So the ones that we're mentioning in this course, we also know that you can back up customizations, which I think we've kind of made clear, Alex, is really important when we're looking at GLP and AAC. So we're going to avoid the ones where we can't back it up. We know they don't have staying power. And so I just kind of wanted to mention that here because I think it's important.
That is really important. Thank you. So let's get into a couple more parent questions, and then we'll switch gears and get into SLP questions. I think these questions will help SLPs as well, because I'm pretty sure parents are going to ask you these questions. So one that I think gets asked over and over again is, will it discourage verbal communication in already verbal kids?
Great question. It won't. And what we know is that individuals will use the least restrictive mode that is supportive for them. And so if they are speaking, it is not going to deter them from speaking. We actually know that research shows us that AAC will enhance, if it's going to support spoken communication, it will enhance it, meaning that it's not going to deter or detract or eliminate those spoken words. I think that's the main gist of it, is that it's not going to eliminate it. It's going to support it. And there's internal and clinical evidence that also shows that it can just support graphic visual organization of language. So it can support all robust AAC is color coded with different color coding. It kind of goes beyond the scope of this conversation to go into all the different color coding systems, but they're color coded by parts of speech. And so it helps kind of graphically organize how we form languages and sentences to build those sentences together.
Yeah. And so I think that sort of brings us into like this next question. So my son's SLP seems to think an AAC will cause him to be stuck in stage 1. How do you convince SLPs this is not true? And I think what this SLP might be thinking is something that I teach about a lot, which is the stuck stage 1 gestalt, which are all these single words. And I'm going to say, if you leave a device for a GLP the way that it comes when you first download it and you don't personalize it, it is quite possible that we will get a lot of those stuck single word gestalts. So I can see where this SLP was coming from, but what did you end up telling this parent, Laura?
Yeah, and so I think that's a really good wondering about maybe that SLP's clinical experience of how we teach AAC and how we teach building single words at a time, and then that resulting, it can result just like you teach in your course with children that are using spoken vocabulary, it can result in stuck single words. But stage one is reflective of how they are processing and sharing language to others. So we know that stage one is looking at full phrases and possibly single words that are intonationally defined as meaningful units of speech or meaningful units of language. And so again, AAC is the tool for expression. If we think about it, we all use AAC. I haven't mentioned this yet. We all use AAC. You guys all probably had to log into Zoom to get here. You text, you email all the time. We all use different forms of AAC other than our spoken words. So AAC is a tool for our language expression. Research tells us it helps with voice output when we're giving voice output, and it can help them organize language with the support of visual representation. So children who are stuck in stage one, it's secondary to that difficulty of breaking apart gestalts, or as you kind of alluded to, Alex, those who have been taught analytic language approaches. If we use NLA strategies in support with that AAC tool, there's no reason to think the child would get stuck in stage one. Anything you would add?
Yeah, I think going back to just that customization. So we have a kid in stage one. We are going to create a folder that says gestalts. We are going to put all of the spoken gestalts in there, or the targeted ones that we're modeling. For those of you in the course, I've got that handout in module 5 with all the different categories. What gestalts do we want to be modeling for this kid? Do they have something for help, something for shared joy, something for sensory motor experiences, something for transitions? So we want to look at all those, and that's what we're going to program in, one gestalt per button. Let's get into that, Laura. People are questioning that now. Why would you put an entire gestalt on one button?
Yeah, and it's a good question. I will say that not every single AAC user will get stuck in single words. I have seen some amazing AAC users that are lightning fire, that learn their system within a few months, and they can script full movies, they can script their favorite songs, they can do it all. They know their system in and out. So for those individuals, we may not need to support them by programming and customizing a full gestalt in a single icon. Call them icons in the AAC world. So a symbol or an icon. However, if they are getting stuck, it means that they're not able to segment and process that language as you're motor planning and programming and moving through the system. And I think it's really important to meet them where they are at, so that then they can process it, and then eventually we can support them in mitigating that. And again, we can do that with our spoken language, and we can also do it on AAC systems. The other thing I will say too is that sometimes this is a good feature matching thing to consider, and one we'll dive into, but it can be super important for that original audio source, knowing that in stage one, things are intonationally defined. Synthesized speech is a huge piece of AAC systems that you're looking at that are going to be high tech. And some systems allow you to record audio. So you would be able to record that original source audio for someone who really benefits from that and needs that, and maybe can't understand the synthesized speech, at least initially. And so that in of itself would be reason to, I would not suggest going in and re-recording all 4,000 vocabulary words in LAMP to recorded audio. I don't think that that is a good use of your time. At least research does not tell us that at this stage. But if we recognize that we hear that rich intonation, and we're going to look to program that same intonation and that same audio from the original source into an icon on the device.
Mhm. And you all, this is why I have an AAC specialist here, Laura. I mean, I'm not even using the right terminology. Called it a button. She's like, in the
Oh,
AAC world, we call it an icon. So you all know I am not an AAC specialist, but I have learned a bazillion things through working with Laura. And you all will too. Isn't she awesome? So we're going to do 2 more questions that came in, and then I really want to take questions from the chat. We've got like about 20-ish minutes left. Right around like what we were just talking about is another question that I think we should address. So someone wrote in and said, please talk about kids who have gotten stuck in prompt dependent. So too much single core word work and ABA. We kind of talked about that, but it's like, okay, they come in and they're already, this is what's going on with them. What do we do?
and I think this was one of those areas where I've worked with autistic individuals for a really long time. In even before then, I have a sister with a disability. So she's my older sister. I feel like I've grown up with someone with complex communication needs, and she's near and dear to my heart. I've watched her look and search to be acknowledged through her communication style and supported her through that. So when I've worked with these autistic individuals who have complex communication needs, and I just see them looking at me, searching for a way to feel acknowledged, that is what gets at my heartstrings. And so when I'm looking at this idea of the question of kids who've gotten stuck and are prompt dependent, whether that be, there's a variety of reasons. This question came in and said, too much core vocabulary and ABA. Again, I want to emphasize core vocabulary is needed in a robust system. It is not the bad guy, but in the AAC world, it has a lot of attention surrounding it and the approaches and using core word of the week. And those all kind of circulate around an analytic language approach and principles, developmental principles that go alongside it. So the idea that we develop 1-word utterances and then 2-word utterances and we combine them and so forth. Also, I'll mention prompting is focusing on the output of an AAC device, or it's really just focusing on output in general, whether that's spoken words or using AAC. It requires us, and this kind of goes back to the post that we did today, Alex, it requires us to assume that we know what the AAC user wants to say or should say in a moment or opportunity. There's a really great quote out there that says, would you want your mom to talk for you? And it's like, no, you wouldn't, because she's assuming maybe she knows what you want to say. And we never, ever, ever will know exactly what someone wants to say. They have an inner voice. And the same thing is true about someone who has complex communication needs. They have an inner voice. We just don't know what exactly that looks like. So what we know is that GLP should be supported using the NLA framework to help them understand how to mitigate and break scripts down, and then beginning putting those word units back together on their own to make novel phrases and sentences. So that framework is heavily focused on providing language input strategies. We will talk all about different input strategies in the course, but it means we're offering language models and allowing the individual to choose which of those models they find value in, which they find meaning in, and then sharing them back meaningfully to communication partners. So we'll talk all about that more in the system, but we're going to focus on providing that input in a systematic way that supports the individual's natural processing and communication style.
So Laura, this came in and this is good to address now instead of leaving for later. Someone is asking, would core be good for someone who is still developing their gestalts? So a stage 1 GLP who needs more gestalts, is core still good for them?
So again, core as defined are words that we are going to use throughout our day. So what I will say to that is that a core word alone, probably not. A core word that's embedded in a gestalt, maybe. It's whether or not we find that Gestalt has meaning for the individual. So you will often see, even in stage 1 Gestalts, core words embedded within them, right? Let's get it. Let's go to the park. Let's do some more. All of those have core words in them. But does the individual find meaning in them? That's what we have to determine. And that's what we're trying to support them with. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah. The other thing I'm just going to add is we don't want to take any of those off the device because, like we said in the beginning, this is something that's going to grow with the child. So we want to keep all of that there because when they're at stages 4, 5, and 6, they need all of that. But I think personally, and what I teach with spoken language is that our focus in stage 1 needs to be on helping them get more gestalt. They need more material to work with. So when they're in stage 2, they can easily mix and match and mitigate. So we're not really going to do that analytic language approach that you see on the majority of AAC, social media, and other courses where we're focusing on a core word of the week. That would be great for somebody that is an analytic language processor. That's why this course has been created, because our GLPs need something different when they're in stage 1. They don't need us to focus on a core word of the week. We have to individualize that device and really focus on the gestalts. And so another question came in, Laura, where do you recommend programming the gestalts? So I had suggested a folder that I've seen people call it gestalts or phrases. This person's also asking, do you do different folders? Example, let's go in the actions folder, I'm hungry in the food folder, etc.
Yeah. And that one is, I wish it had a simple answer, but it is completely dependent upon the organization system of the app that you have. And that is why, as Alex mentioned earlier, we have some other AAC specialists in addition to myself that are going to be talking to you all about the app specific software organizations, the features that they have that benefit GLP, and then where you might consider customizing them. Because again, everything is going to be individualized to the AAC user themselves. But for some individuals, it might be a completely separate folder under the categories or groups page. For some, it might be very appropriate to put them in the social phrase. For some, it might be, especially for semantic compaction, it might be a little bit more, you might have to consider what that's going to look like for them. There's some already kind of built in. I don't want to give away too much because we have a really great individual. Emily Diaz is going to be, she's going to be helping us with that one. And she has some really great information there. So just know that it's truly system dependent.
Okay, so a lot of good questions are coming in now. Thanks, Laura. I just want to hit upon maybe 1 or 2 more of these questions that were emailed in. This, especially for parents, this 2-parter is, where do I start at home with a new AAC, but the child sees it only as entertainment? Will they just play around with it?
Yeah, so we're going to go over so many supports and strategies in the course, but for now, I'm going to say that the best and most natural approach is to follow your child's lead and see what they are already communicating. We, as you mentioned, Alex, we want to model gestalts at the stage you see them in and go from there. So if they are only seeing their system as entertainment, I'm making a little bit of an assumption here, but chances are they may be in stage 1. That's often what I see for someone who is GLP using their system to kind of play around with or entertainment. I would also wonder, is that hardware being used for other things, right? Is it an iPad that's open that they're the majority of the time being truly used for entertainment? Kate McLaughlin has talked about this in the past, but we don't necessarily want to lock them into only having the AAC app, like we've talked about for dedicated devices, because they can show us communication styles through media, through map, like Google Maps even. There's ways that they're showing us through the hardware, but it really goes back to the input that we're giving them as communication partners. So if they're truly using it as play, it might mean that we've missed opportunities to show them what language means throughout their day in different contexts. I'll also say that so many individuals that use AAC need that time for exploration and babbling. And it can look like playing, it can look like entertainment. Some people have even called it stimming. But when we look at how language develops for both GLP and ALP, we really do see that there's exploration that occurs. And even in infants, spoken sounds and babbling is normal. It's expected and a normal way to acquire language. So it is really important that our AAC users be given that same opportunity to explore and to learn all the aspects of the organization of their language too. So it's kind of a double question. You want to give them time to explore while still modeling meaningful context and gestalts throughout their day.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay, so I think that we have time to answer a few of these questions that came in through the chat. So if a client is not using an AAC device besides when they are prompted, what should the next step be for the SLP?
Well, the first question would be, what input strategies are you using? So if we see individuals that are highly prompted, that only use a device when prompted, chances are they may have some level of prompt dependency that has been corroborated by a lesson design. Because what we know is that prompt dependency is actually secondary to a lesson design. It has nothing to do with the ability or inability for that individual to learn or to process the language being given to them. It really has to do with the lesson design. So I always tell people, it's not them, it's us. It's not you, it's me. So go back to the beginning, take away the demands for them to use it as a form of expression, and just flood their environment with input, flood their environment with models on that device. We mentioned in our post today, Alex, about verbal referencing and how we can just talk aloud what we think they might be showing us. Like if their body is really excited because you've just gotten out their favorite sensory item, then go to I'm feeling page, I'm excited. Take down all of the demands and just model.
Yep. Model.
Yeah.
Okay, so a couple other questions here. Have you ever experienced having to switch from one program or app to another? If so, what were the key markers, observations that led to that consideration or things to look out for?
Yes is the short answer. So I was trying to think about this today. I've worked with hundreds, if not thousands of AAC users now in the 13 years I've been practicing as an SLP. And the majority of individuals are successful with the first robust software that they trial. Because again, it's more about the input and the opportunities that they're given than it is about the language software. However, what I will say is that sometimes markers to switch a system are there, meaning that navigational demands are too hard for them and they're getting lost in the pages. That's one that I have seen. Different softwares have different navigational demands. And when I say navigational demands, I mean that it may take in one software 2 hits to get to a vocabulary word or an icon. It might take another vocabulary software system 7 hits, depending upon where that word naturally lives, yes, you can put it like front load it, but we don't necessarily, as we've mentioned, want to do that because you're using up that valuable real estate and you're rewriting the organization that we know from solid research is supported. So that's one of the reasons. I've also switched systems. One thing to kind of think about is that well-meaning individuals will sometimes match a vocabulary software to the individual's current needs. So I have seen systems where someone comes in with, I've seen everything from like 2 or 1 cell on the page to, you know, maybe 16, thinking that an emergent communicator needs that now. Well, when we look at AAC assessment, we really want to feature match to what they can motorically access. So if they're a direct access user, what they can isolate with their finger and kind of access on the screen. And then depending upon if their visual array or the icons on the screen are too busy or too many, we can hide vocabulary if we need to. We don't like to do that because that's missed opportunity for learning and exploration, but it can be done. So sometimes what I have also done is if an array is just too limiting or needs to grow, or for example, I've had Gestalt language processors who really have developed their lexicon for the alphabet and literacy, and they have started encoding, and that is how they are scripting. Well, then we might want to shift the page set or the vocabulary within the software, and sometimes even switch the software to match that front loading that keyboard or the predictability or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Those are 2 instances. I'm sure there's more, but those are the 2 that kind of come to my mind.
The one that pops into my mind is if something else is going to work better for the family or give the family more buy-in. Because if it's not working for the family and it's sitting in the corner collecting dust when they're at home, but like the example the person gave us earlier with cough drop, what a great reason to switch. This other system is going to better support the family, and we have to have family buy-in if this is going to become part of the child's life.
Yeah. On the flip side of that, we do want to be cautious about flipping it to the environment, because I've also seen teams, especially if a student comes in that's transferred into a school district and said, oh, we all use, I won't say any app names or software names because I don't want to, there's no one that's necessarily better than the other. And, you know, offline, we've talked about that. All of the ones that we recommended, I have used for Gestalt language processors with fidelity and success. It's just really what feature they need in a system. So we also don't want to just switch. If someone has had a system and they have used that system with success, we're not going to switch it based off of the preference of the communication partner in those other circumstances. Now, if they haven't had success and we see device abandonment, we see that the communication partners haven't bought in, they're not modeling, nothing's catching on, those would be really great avenues to look and say, is there something better suited?
Thank you, Laura.
I just saw someone put in the comments that they had this experience.
Yeah. Okay. Can we briefly talk about light tech and Gestalt processors? It seems like this might create that stuck stage 1, especially with people like teachers, aides, etc., that are not familiar with this framework. What do you think about that, Laura?
I would want to know more, because a tool is only as good as the communication partner using it. I have actually seen, full disclosure, I've already kind of offered some light tech supports to communication partners that I support. And oftentimes light tech is more well received because it's easier for the communication partner to digest and process. But really, light tech or high tech, it goes back to 2 things. It goes back to the communication partners' input and modeling of that system. And are they doing that with fidelity? So if you give good supports and training to someone using light tech, they can use that to support someone who is a GLP. The other thing is does the Gestalt language processor respond to it? Like, can they process it? Is it something that they're finding meaning in? And so best practice is going to be giving them that original audio source. Synthesized speech isn't always the best for them, but we also know they need access to something robust that they can use with fidelity, and that in the AAC world is going to be something that's a speech generating device. So it's this balance, right? I think that I always think that there's a place for light tech, but yeah, I should say, and we still want robust speech generating devices. So I think it's a yes, and I think that I can see where you're coming from for the pitfalls that could occur. But I also think that if they're well trained and they're using the spoken language models corresponding with the technology, again, whether it's light tech or high tech, in the level that the GLP is in, stage 1, stage 2, I think that you're going to see some success.
And
What do you think?
get into that a little bit more, Laura. I feel like a lot of questions have come in about light tech. And I love also that you're going to talk about funding sources too, because our goal should be really starting with that robust, but that's not always an option. Somebody just wrote in, I'm still not clear on what light tech is. Maybe can you define that?
Yeah, light tech is going to be that technology that has no audio source or synthesized speech. So it's going to be picture drawings, photographs, writing with a pencil. Those are all forms of light tech that we see throughout our day. So light tech boards in the AAC world are often associated with core vocabulary boards. I will say that that is not what we are going to be proposing in our course, and not the resource that we're going to be sharing, because we do know that that is not how our Gestalt language processors are processing experiences language, and probably not the best place to start if you're an early language learner in your Gestalt language processor. So just know that's not really what we're talking about when we talk about light tech, but that resource is going to be available in the course.
Yes. And speaking of the course, I'm going to end with this, everyone. So for those of you that are watching right now live, the pre-sale for the AAC GLP course starting tonight at midnight Central Standard Time. So you will be getting an email in your inbox with links just for you. If you're a parent, professional, student, SLP or SLPA, I've got the 2 tracks going just like I do with the original or main course. You'll be getting $100 off enrollment. So now is the time for you to do this. It's just for you, only members. It is not open to the public. And that will be running November 11th to the 30th. This will all be in the email. Now, for those of you that are watching this on YouTube and are not members and are interested in this, our course will be released February 3rd of 2023, 2323. Really easy to remember. I'm all about the numbers because the original course was released on 2222. So that is the date that it will be for sale to the public. Right now, what you can do is hop on meaningfulspeech.com, click on the AAC course. You'll see it there. There's an icon for it, and sign up on the wait list for our freebie, our AAC freebie that Laura developed along with Katie Arnold, and it is how to tell that your current AAC user might be a Gestalt processor. That's also a question that comes up quite a bit, and the whole freebie PDF is all about that, along with some basic do's and don'ts. Right on there, one sheet, easy to hand out and share with staff and parents and families. So again, you can get that by going to meaningfulspeech.com, click on the AAC course icon, and put your info in for the freebie. And once you're on that list, I try not to flood people. I will say I send about 1 email a week usually. I think you all got 2 today, which is unusual, but usually 1 a week. And I will be sending out information. We will be talking about all these AAC specialists that are doing the bonus modules. If you follow me on Instagram, I'm going to be doing probably some posts with them as we lead up to February. So thank you all for being here with us tonight. We only went 2 hours, or I'm sorry, 2 minutes past the hour. I was like, no, we did not go 2 hours. 2 minutes past the hour. Thank you so much, Laura, for being here. If you feel like watching this again or sharing it with people, as soon as I end this, I'm going to try to upload it to YouTube. So it should be up there ready to share this evening or tomorrow morning. All right. Thanks again.
Thanks for joining us.
Everyone.